Okay, good to go. Welcome to Manchester SEO Podcast. Today we're very pleased to have Alex on. Alex McCann from Ultra HQ. Tell us a bit about yourself.
So, I'm trying to think where I start. 20 years ago, I guess, is where I start. So my background is, used to be working in the music industry. I used to be a journalist and I used to run live music events. And I did that for 14 and a half years, all in all. Very cool, very rock and roll. Got to interview some of the biggest rock and roll bands in the world. So likes of Paramore and Muse and Panic at the Disco and My Chemical Romance.
Yeah.
I got to put on bands like the 1975 and Catfish and the Bottlemen. And you get to an age in music where you kind of think, I want to change, I want my weekends back, I want to literally not start work at 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. Yeah. And I'd always had an interest in marketing. When I go back to my student days, I studied business and marketing. And I set up a social media business kind of by accident initially. The name was called Ultra HQ. And I realised we go back to 2009 and there was that real big sort of disconnect between businesses opening on the high street. So a business would open, say, on a Monday, but it wouldn't actually make the press till 6 weeks later. Right. That was how bad the press was in those days. And I was just posting on Twitter what was going on in the town. Yeah. And then suddenly businesses came to me and said, can you help us with social media? And that's how it started.
Amazing. I love those kind of stories. I've heard it so much, especially in the social media side of things. There's a guy who's a professional. He was a professional kayaker, and he got injured, and he had like a GoPro that he used to record all his stuff on. Yeah. And then he got injured, and he went to the comps to see people, and he said, "Can you do what you do for us?" And then he started one of the sponsors asking him, and it just grew from that. Completely accidental, but you were obviously doing some good stuff on Twitter at the time.
I was. I mean, Twitter was big at the time, and I think the thing is, there is a lot of skills in when you work in the music industry. Social media in the music industry is always like 10 steps ahead of the rest of the world. So you remember like the early days of social media, it was MySpace. And literally I was making money out of MySpace in like 2004, 2005. Wow. And then I was making money from Facebook as well. And that's the thing, you like, as someone who put on live music events, your job was to get people away from computer screens and get them out spending money in the real world. Yeah. And that's kind of how it started. So before I started Altrincham HQ, I'd had 10 years of real world marketing experience. And then I had the experience of setting up Ultra HQ as kind of a community thing. So I'd had, again, 1 year of running a separate business or a community project before I'd actually took on a paid client. Right. Which I think set me up well because people knew I could do what I could do.
Yeah. You already had credibility.
Yeah, definitely.
The biggest thing, really, in the marketing world is credibility, which builds trust.
Yeah.
People come to you.
Yeah. I mean, at the time, it wasn't a career. Like you go to networking just as I do, and now you go to a room and there'll be 10 people in that room that say they do social media. Yeah. When I started off, I think I knew one other person, and she's not doing that job anymore. So I think I'm the only one that's still around from 2009, which is crazy.
So you mentioned how, and I get that with music and the work you were doing.
Yeah.
It kind of relates quite well.
Yeah.
How did you get into the music business?
My background, again, before I got into music, I'd studied business and marketing. So I went to Salford University. I did what you call a traditional business course, studying on the marketing stream. And it got to that stage where I'd finished university and it was like, what do I want to do with my life? And I didn't really want... all the lecturers were talking about, you can go and work in a supermarket and you can go and do the marketing for supermarkets or do the business management. And I'm like, that didn't really sit with me. I didn't really want to do that.
Doesn't sound very sexy, does it?
It doesn't. It's not what I wanted to get into. And then I saw this music industry course. So it was the very early days of the internet. So this course was called Music Industry and New Media Management. Right. And new media basically meant websites, very early websites because it was still dial-up internet days then.
Yeah.
And I did that course, and music was always my passion from like literally day dot. Like my dad's a massive music fan, I'm a massive music fan, I still am a massive music fan, and I listen to it obsessively. And I just did this course I only did half the course. I did 1 year of a 2-year course.
Right.
And then suddenly I set up this website in 1999, started blogging before blogging was known as a thing.
Oh, right.
And my very first blog was read by 17 people. Right. I could have given up at 17 people. The second one got about 35, then it got 100, then I was getting 10,000 readers a week. And then the BBC came to me and said, can you write for us? And then other publications came and said, can you write for us? And they were paying me.
Wow.
So I was like, yeah. And then that just kickstarted the career.
When you were setting up the website, did you think that actually I think this could turn into something? Or was it just an interest?
It was an interest. It was a hobby. Yeah. Like, we were told to design this website in college. And I was like, well, what do I do? I'm like, I was 20 years old, I think I was at the time. I'd had no experience.
Yeah.
I couldn't do a website about me. No. So I was like, well, I read the music press. I read NME. I read Melody Maker every week. Sure. Why don't I just do album reviews, live reviews of the gigs I'm going to?
Yeah.
I wasn't qualified as a journalist. I just started writing it. So I had no idea of where it would go. And I think it was that almost first mover advantage. Like the idea, I was one of Manchester's first music websites. So it's kind of like you just got the kudos and the props from doing it.
Yeah.
You got the right contacts. And it was only, I think, 3 months after writing that very first article, I got paid for it. And I was like, I'm getting paid for something I love.
Yeah.
Like, no brainer. I just continued to do it. And then I got to interview all these big bands.
Amazing. I think there's a communication that's involved in that kind of work, isn't there? Whether it's written or verbal or that relates well to social media. So what engages people? What?
Oh yeah, 100%. It was storytelling. That's essentially what I was doing. I was like interviewing someone, and I was interviewing different people every day. So the classic example that was really the polar opposites. One day I interviewed George Galloway, the politician,
right,
and that was like a 1 hour long interview about politics. The next day, I was interviewing one of S Club Juniors about going to the Harry Potter premiere. Right. That was literally the totally polar parts. I'd meet gangster rappers, indie wallflowers, emo boys and emo girls, and everything. So you had to be very relatable, get to the nuance of their story, and then tell that story. And that's what I have to do now in socials.
Yeah, dealing with clients. And,
yeah.
Fascinating. I love that. I love those kind of stories. So, moving on from that, how did you get? So you mentioned you started up Twitter, like a more of a location based, what's going on, style thing in Altrincham. How took us through that then?
So I set up this Twitter account. The only reason the business was called Altrincham HQ is because I wanted Altrincham in the title, and it was taken. So I was like, what do I put at the end of it? So I put HQ at the end of it. It made me sound very important at the time, even though it was just me from the bedroom. So I was just posting about what was going on, and I had two sides to the business. So the very first client wasn't actually in Altrincham, bizarrely. It was a fish and chip shop in Manchester's Northern Quarter. It's no longer there now, but it was called Leo's Fish Bar, and it became known as the Twitter famous fish and chip shop. So the Evening News featured them, I think the Daily Mail featured them, the Sun featured them because of what we were doing on social media. I think Lily Allen went in there. It was just a really cool rock and roll chippy, basically. And that was our very first management client. And our very first training client was Altrincham Ice Rink. So one of the biggest businesses in our town. Literally, when you think of Altrincham, you think of the football club, the ice rink, and the market. The market wasn't big at the time. So it was one of the biggest businesses in the town, and we went and trained 6 members of staff.
Right.
And from that point, everything just kind of flows. It's like get your first client when you're starting off a business, and then when you deal with businesses that sort of people know, you then get the businesses that surround them that want to work for you. So yeah, it took a while to get going, but I mean, from that point on, it's just been virtually continual growth, apart from obviously the pandemic, which stopped everyone. So
I was actually I used to look at your post during the pandemic, because it stops the thing that you love doing, which was going out and seeing live music. And you were talking about that quite a lot, which I found fascinating at the time. And then when it was all released, it was that first one back, and the excitement that came across in the post was it was like music is still my life outside of work. And I went last year, I went to 86 gigs in a year, and imagine that, and I think I was going to quite a lot before the pandemic, and just like crashing down to nothing and go, what do normal people do? They watch TV, and I had to actually, I do quite like watching TV. I like having a quiet night in occasionally these days. Do you feel like I talk to a lot of businesses, and they the pandemic, although financially might have affected them in a negative way, they actually reassessed what they were doing and all the processes and the way they did it, and actually post-pandemic was stronger for it. What was it like for you at that time?
Absolutely really scary. For that first week, it was terrifying, because I was like, I'd gone from a lot of our businesses at the time in terms of the management were hospitality. And they were literally shut overnight. So I remember I was round at my parents at the time, and I looked at my phone, and it was like, restaurants are closing from 10 p.m. tonight. I was like, how do I live for the next however long? I mean, at the time we only thought it'd be like 2 weeks, 2 months, and it ended up being for about a year. But so my income was just decimated overnight. The social media trading things was okay. I did lose I got postponed a lot of big contracts at the time, big group bookings. Like we had Costa Coffee was one of our clients, and literally I was so hyped to have them as a training client, and that training session was due to happen about 2 weeks after lockdown. We eventually got it back, but it took about 8 months for us to be sat in a room training those people. But the training side kind of recovered straight away, because you remember we went from everyone meeting face to face to suddenly realising Zoom was a thing. And that actually worked out really well long term. So we'd had international clients before, but literally we went from training people just in predominantly the Greater Manchester Northwest area to training people in Australia, New Zealand, Dubai, Portugal. And that was like, wow, this opens the world to me. I don't have to be tied to just this geographical location, even though my business still is a geographical location.
Well, mine's Manchester SEO. It was 2 years before I got a client within Manchester. They were all everywhere. Which is the beauty of the internet, I think. And training does kind of relay well out online through Zoom and whatever.
I still think to this day, at the time of the pandemic, I said 80% of my training would be online after the pandemic ends, and it was until literally last year. And then suddenly now everyone wants face-to-face, and I'm still trying to get across the point to people. Actually, online is just effective. So we have training clients all over the UK, and those training clients that might be in London or Wales or Scotland, they get just as good service on our Zoom training as someone does face-to-face. And I think sometimes the only reason people actually want face-to-face training is actually for the change of scenery, not actually because face-to-face training is more effective. So I would actually like to do more training. It's probably now 50-50 what I do online versus face-to-face. And it should really be about 75% online.
Well, when I was planning today, social media is something a bit like SEO, but everyone goes, "Hey, we need to sort that out. We need to do this." So it's a really, it's a topic people talk about a lot. So we could go on for hours and hours and hours and hours. When we're looking at social media, What? I mean, I suppose the challenge for you was when you first started, like you said, MySpace and then Twitter, and then I suppose was it Facebook?
It's Facebook
Twitter?
next. Facebook was Facebook was before Twitter, but as a business, I was Twitter first.
Yeah. Well, I remember LinkedIn being around in 2004.
Yeah, LinkedIn was like, I didn't really touch LinkedIn because I was working in the music industry. Probably about 2010, 11, I probably touched LinkedIn, and now it's probably my biggest part of business.
And then like the last couple of years, TikTok and all that. So I imagine the main challenge for you is keeping up with everything and being able to deliver not only to the clients but also training as well that's meaningful and works for people.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, social media, I'm going to be honest, it was easy a decade ago because there was less channels. It was so much easier. Yeah. And I sometimes look back at those early tweets that I sent, and I was winning business over text-only tweets. That's how I was doing it, just words. I was winning business. Yeah. Now, it's TikToks, and it's Reels, and it's video, and it's photos. And so, I've got to keep relevant, otherwise I'm out of a job. Yeah. And I've got to keep the training and the management relevant to clients as well. Yeah. I think where we perhaps differ from other social media people is, yes, we've got that storytelling element of journalism. Yes, we've got the idea of compelling content. But ultimately, because I studied business way back in the day, I'm coming at it from a very business perspective. So people will say to me, like they'll say to you, I'm really good at social media. And my question is, but is it driving sales? Because your likes don't pay the mortgage. Yeah. You getting comments on your post, it might make you feel good, but does it affect your bank balance? Does it affect the sales? And I think that's where lots of businesses go wrong. And I come in it from an outside perspective because I think that's the problem. People's got things in the wrong way. People will judge their success on social media on likes. And I know there's businesses in my hometown that if you judge them on social media, they're getting 150, 200 likes a post. Yet every time I'm walking past, there are no customers in that business. And they need someone like me, but their ego is taking over because they think they're doing social media so well.
They call them vanity metrics, don't they?
Yes, and that's a danger. It's like a little bit of knowledge. Oh, I'm doing okay on social media. I can post every day. I'm getting the X amount of likes. Yeah, might look good. It doesn't drive the bills.
It's a bit like visitors to websites and traffic. Yeah. You can look at keywords and they're getting a lot of traffic through for something, but it's not related to them, and they could actually have less traffic, get a lot more business, a lot more inquiries from it. So it's quite interesting that you say that it's focused on. One of my questions is usually, how do you measure success? And it's sales all the way. I mean, not immediately. We've got to be realistic. When I start working with a business, I'll always tell them, you've got to be patient. It's not going to drive success overnight. Don't expect to do a training session or employ me as a social media manager and get you sale in 24 hours. That isn't going to happen. So on the management side, we sign a client up for 3 months initially, and at the end of those 3 months, they should be seeing some signs of success, whether that is direct sales or indications that the leads coming in, the metrics in the right way, the meaningful ways are increasing. But ultimately, it is down to sales. Most businesses, that's why they employ someone like me or employ someone like you, because they want to increase the actual sales. They're running a business, not a hobby. It's amazing when you hear like the misconceptions that people have when they come to you. I mean, with SEO, it's a similar thing. Not doing very well. I need more business online. It doesn't happen overnight. This takes some time. There is an investment involved in it. What are the main, when people come to you, what do you think the main, I suppose, expectations that you have to manage constantly?
I think what we just touched on, the likes versus reality, because again, we've got certain clients that we work with. Again, if you looked at all those vanity metrics, we've got a client that we worked with that when we started working with them, they had 400 followers on Instagram. Now, we haven't massively increased that. We've taken from 400 followers to 1,000 followers. But they're actually continually getting orders from that Instagram account worth thousands. on a sort of almost a weekly, monthly basis.
Right.
So they're looking at us and go, "You're doing an amazing job, Alex." But I think other businesses will look at that and go, "What? You've only driven an extra 600 followers." That's a perception. Also, the over expectations is they don't realise actually what goes on in terms of social media management. So they look at the content. So they look how often you're posting. They'll look at the quality of that content. And we're managing those expectations. So some of the posts that we do for clients that actually perform really well are what you'd almost call like lo-fi content. So just quick, easy content wins that's taken on a phone that is literally, from an aesthetic quality, isn't the best photo in the world or isn't the best video in the world. But it's actually, again, driving cash in tills.
I spoke to a guy recently who's he said, "I've been posting every work day for the last 6 months on LinkedIn." And I was getting a lot of engagement. See, people know me. That's great. And then I stopped. And I just started engaging with other people. And so I've had a lot more inquiries since that, just by giving more, adding more value to other people.
You have to. It's like face-to-face networking, which we both do. Imagine turning up to a networking event, doing the intro round, which is effectively the equivalent of doing your post on social media, and then walking out the room, not having a conversation with people. It's a conversation where you get to know people. So we met at networking, we had a conversation, we worked together on a podcast now. That wouldn't have happened without the conversation.
Well, the next thing that happened was I did some training with him. And that definitely wouldn't have happened without our chat at the networking group. And like you say, I suppose it's the interaction. You start to understand, could I spend a few hours with this person training, or do I trust them enough to work with them?
It's that meet, like, no trust. It's a classic networking cliche, but you have kind of got to like someone, and that's why I put elements of my personal life on social media, because it gravitates the right people towards me. So on social media, you know that I don't just post about social media. I post about rock and roll and going to gigs, and I post about where I've ate, and I post about running and going to the gym. And those three things gravitate those right people towards me, and we have conversations with it. Like when people come round, I work from home, when people come around to my house, they see my running medals on the wall. And like 9 times out of 10, within 2 seconds of them walking in the room, they go, "You're a runner." And then they start talking about what they do for exercise or what they don't do for exercise. And it just starts a rapport building. It's conversations.
That's right. And common interests always help, don't they?
You've got to put when we're small business owners, we've got to put those elements of our personal life out there. I think people are too, particularly on platforms like LinkedIn, they are too professional. They're too regimented and they're too straight, and they need to put out there those elements of the personality, because that's what's going to get people to buy from you.
That was the one thing I took away from training at the time. Was you said, if you want more engagement, put a picture of yourself on. And people will see it's you. And there's more of a connection with it. And then it worked, you know. 100%. It improved everything.
Like people react well to a face. Like since you've started this podcast, I immediately stop and see your post, because I see either your face on it or someone you've interviewed's face on it, and it makes it's a scroll stopper. It makes it stop for people.
It's good to know. We'll do more. So the one thing that we talk about the training for a bit, because obviously I've sent staff to you as well, and because I think the copywriters and SEO guys, it's good to understand, because they're all algorithms, and it's all about engagement, whether it's user generated signals for keeping people on a page longer or whatever. It all helps with what we do. And the way I came away from it, I thought, this is like SAS training. So it was like everything that you needed to do, but in the shortest space of time, because for me time was I was doing everything.
Yeah.
Running the business, doing the work for clients.
Yeah.
So time was really, both in saving time and economy of how you use it was really important. And I like that. And, in terms of what different types of content are there, how do you plan that? What do you do? And it was literally 5-10 minutes a day working on that. Yeah. And then you sorted. Yeah. For the rest of the day. Of course, engaging which I really liked, and we've spoken about that it's really important.
Yeah, I mean the training side of what we do, just to give a bit of flavour for what we do, someone comes to us and we do what's called a pre-training survey. There's 8 areas we look at and we go, what score would you give yourself out of 10? Usually people rate them significantly higher than actually what the reality is. Yeah. But by the end of the training, we then do a survey and go, well, what score is you now for those areas? And usually what you see is people improve 2 or 3 or 4 points higher than what they were at the start of the session. So you imagine, you've come to a session, you've only spent 3.5 hours, which is really good use of your time, and you've improved by 30-40% by the end of it, and then you've got to implement that. Yeah. But I think what training, one-to-one training, whether it's social media training, SEO training, any form of training, it speeds up the process in your business. So I think what people try and do is they try and do everything on the cheap. So rather than pay for social media or pay for SEO, what they'll actually do is they'll follow a few of those people on social media and they try and learn sort of what I'd call piecemeal. Yeah. So they'll take a little snippet from you, a little snippet from me, but because they are not invested in it, they won't actually action any of it as well. So they think they're learning. It's taken them probably about 5 years to learn what they'll learn in 3.5 hours. Yeah. And it's like business. Most businesses fail in 5 years, and they probably fail because they've never invested in the right things. Yeah. You haven't got huge amounts of time to make a business work. You've got all the pressures of a mortgage. You've got the pressures of just living. The cost of baked beans is what? God knows, £2 nowadays. And you've got to live. And you can't set up a business in January and spend 5 years learning about social media to the point where you get it right, when you could actually just come to someone and spend half a day and get it right from the outset.
A lot of the issues we find with having a bit of knowledge about SEO is that people do something really good, and because they're not overly sure that that's the right thing to do, because it's changing all the time as it's social media algorithms, that they change and do something else, and that's the harmful thing. Is the not knowing and not being confident that actually I'm doing this properly. Rather, not that they're doing anything too bad, but they could speed things up. Continually doing good things, repeating and those processes all the time. Yeah, definitely.
My website performs okay in terms of SEO on social media, and that's probably a danger because it's performing okay. I'm not necessarily going to go, I'm going to do that, and that's the same with social. So some people on social are performing okay, and they think that only social media training is for someone who would rate themselves a 1 out of 10. Right. So you go, I'm okay, I'm posting consistently, I'm getting likes on social media, I'm doing okay, I don't need Alex's services. And I guess that's the same for me with SEO, because I'm doing okay and I rank for certain words, I know I could probably perform 10 times better if I employed an SEO person. I think that's what you need sometimes. You need that go, okay, I'm doing okay, don't want to do okay, I want to do great.
Well, you know I am.
Yes.
So we were talking about habits and repeating them. With when I was looking for questions, so depending on who client is and what they do, it can be hard to find interesting questions to spark the inspiration. For social media, what do you ask a social media manager before you employ them? And there's hundreds and hundreds of utter rubbish. Yeah. I'd like to share one with you that made me smile. How would you handle a response from Elon Musk on Twitter? As an interview question.
That is a question?
Yeah, and I thought actually, perhaps that's quite interesting because I mean, not just him. Like on any social media, if someone's got a massive following.
Yeah.
Perhaps you want to use that.
Yeah. I mean, it depends who's responding to you. I mean, if Elon Musk responded to one of my tweets, I know I'm probably in trouble in some way. The same with Trump. But literally, there are people who do those techniques on social media. It's a bit of a hack. You get someone with a big following, you try and get a response out of them. So people will be doing this to Stephen Bartlett all the time and that kind of thing. Yeah. And to be fair, again, it goes down to but is it driving business? Yeah. That's ultimately the question. Is Elon Musk responding to you going to drive any more social media trading? For me, it's not going to. So again, it goes down to vanity metrics. Yeah. It would be interesting if he responded about social media as he responding to politics or something like that. But yeah, it's an interesting question.
I mean, on that note, do you have any funny examples of posts that have just gone mental for the most ridiculous things? Like things that have really, where you've gone, I didn't expect that to go how it did. Like massive reach.
There was one, our most popular post on LinkedIn, this was LinkedIn, reached 109,000 people. I partly expected it because there are certain things that work on social media. Usually it's surprising or impressive. Yeah. Divisive is another tool that works quite well on social media. Yeah, it does work. I mean, divisive was the question we asked, and this was in 2018, so it was what I call the glory days of LinkedIn. And it was a question of, just saw this on Twitter, what are your thoughts? And the thing that I saw on Twitter was, why have I done 4 years of uni for a 25 grand a year job when there's people who are earning absolute wads? Can't be asked. Yeah. And then I asked the question, if you were 18 in 2018, would you go to university? Right. And obviously that is quite a polarised, divisive question because people have got very strong opinions on it and people have got very strong opinions about going again. So when you've got something in your industry it is like quite divisive, it gets a reaction. And obviously when it's what you call a global subject, so anyone can have an opinion on should you go to university. It's why quite often on social media you'll see a lot of questions like trying to think, I did have an example in my head then. It's why you see the tattoos on the workplace question. You'll always see that on LinkedIn at least once a month. What's your opinions on tattoos in the workplace? It's not really relevant, but people ask it for engagement bait. 109,000 people on LinkedIn. What else have I had? There's been a few. There was a thing. It's usually things you expect. Yeah. There's nothing really that surprising. That it's sort of because as a social media person, you're used to looking at the data. You're used to having that gut feeling. Yeah. So usually, what you do on social media is you go with your gut feeling, you back it up with data. Right. That's kind of what you do. So. Sometimes you go with your intuition and it fails, but that's part of the experimentation of social media, but usually you're proved right. Yeah, it was based on experience and logic and understanding of what would work and be beneficial, I suppose. Yeah, and then that's why people come to a social media expert. If you think, on an average year, I actually worked out, on an average year, we're coming up with 3,000 ideas a year. Yeah. And that is because we're posting every day on our own social media account, but we're also posting every day for at any time about 6 to 7 clients. Yeah. So if you think you've got all the data points from 7 different businesses on different social media platforms, you definitely get an intuitive understanding of what works. Whereas if you're a solo business owner, your only experience of posting in data is your own account. Yeah. And you're not coming from that marketing knowledge as well. So I think working with a social media company and working with an SEO company gives you those huge variety of data points from different industries and different experiences. We're constantly trying to work out changes in Google's algorithm. Yeah. I mean, if it was a member of staff, I would have cited it by now. It's just so inconsistent. But anyway, that's a different matter. Yeah. But on a real-time basis, you can see performance of all the clients. What's good on that site? That's kind of massively. What have we done there? Yeah. What's the process? So we're seeing now that in
April in 2024 that content demonstrating expertise really works.
Yeah.
And if you do it in this way, this is how. Whereas other sites that aren't as good on that, but they're better on other stuff, aren't performing as well. So you can make logical assumptions based on what you see.
Yeah, and you take these learning experiences from many different sectors, and that's what makes a job really interesting. So you can be working with, say, a restaurant, and you do one piece of content, and it might have no tangible connection. And this is a really extreme, but you can go, oh, that works for a restaurant. I'm going to do that idea for a funeral director. So it's really as wide and variety as that, and they're totally unlinked. And I think that's the great thing about not specialising in any sector. Like, quite often in business we'll go, have you worked with a business like ours? And it's actually probably a benefit for me to say, no, I've never worked with a business like yours, and that's what's going to make your social media different than everyone else. Because if you do just one sector, you do everything as a formula. If you do it in different sectors, you change it and rip it up and just go from you come from the customer's perspective.
Yeah. I mean, for SEO, I would say it's a conflict of interest, because if I've got all the dentists in Manchester as clients, then they're all going for the same keywords.
Exactly.
And so which one do I do more work on? It's paying the most. So it makes no sense. You may as well have a lot of experience in different sectors doing different things.
And we're generally the same. Like, if we work with, say, an Indian restaurant in Altrincham, we generally wouldn't work with another Indian restaurant in Altrincham unless there's sort of a radically different offering. Because again, what would we do? Yes, we can have different tones of voice, we can have different content, we can have different style, but ultimately you're competing for the same customers, and that is, as you said, a conflict of interest.
We had a guy called George Clark on from City Lock and Safe. And it's a very well-known locksmiths and other stuff. And they're 67 years old this year. So massive family business. Staying relevant in the modern world is something that it's his challenge. Do you have any advice for someone who's starting a business? And how they should, look at not only what social media platform to use, but how to go about starting it all up and doing it.
Yeah, I think what businesses have to realise when they're starting up is that marketing ultimately matters. Marketing is essentially taking someone who doesn't know you to using your services and telling all the friends about you. So what you've got to do to achieve that and make that happen is you've got to go through that process of awareness, consideration, sales, and there's lots of things that fit into that, lots of different facets of marketing. The good thing about social media is it's relatively affordable to do, and anyone can do it with training. So for anyone, whether it's a locksmith, whether it's a cake company, you've got to be more visible than the rest of the competition. Is it competing for visibility? Like, if you think, particularly in competitive industries, like you just said, locksmith, anyone can set one up. There's probably in any one town, there might be 4, 5, 6 different locksmiths, even in a small town. The one that's the most visible in social media, at networking, on Google, is the one that's going to get the most sales. And to any business starting out, if they think the marketing isn't important, ask themselves, why does Pepsi still advertise? Why does Starbucks still advertise? And Subway and McDonald's and Tesco's? Like, literally, there's a Tesco's 2 minutes walk from here. They will be spending money on advertising despite being one of the biggest brands in the UK. And yet a locksmith will set up and no one knows the name, and they're suddenly expecting a flood of customers. That locksmith has to do more marketing than Tesco's to get the customers, because no one knows the name. So I think, if I'm honest, you can never do too much marketing. Like, that's another worry. Like, people think, but if I post on social media every day, aren't I going to annoy people? No, because most people won't see it every day. There's an algorithm, which if you're posting 7 days a week, means your customers are probably only going to see you 3 or 4 times a week. So you've got to be visible. Like, the only one that's ever going to get sick of your post or your face is you, because you're the one posting it. Like, I'm sick of seeing my face, my customers aren't.
So, I mean, there's a lot of do's that we can talk about on social media. Are there many don'ts? that you'd
Oh,
say these are things you must not do? They can be really harmful.
Yeah, I think the main don'ts are all the obvious. If it's too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. So at the moment, obviously, AI is a big subject. And if I'm honest, AI has lots of uses. But don't use AI for your copywriting. Don't use it for your social media, because the amount of times I'm going to see a rocket emoji and the word elevate in that copy is insane. So don't try and do quick wins and hacks. So don't use AI for your copywriting. Don't just go and follow a scattergun approach of like 1,000 people and not have any conversations. You've got to be targeting what you're doing. Don't post something if it doesn't excite you in the first place, because if it doesn't excite you, it's not going to excite your customers. There's so many don'ts. I think just approach social media from a point of care. Like, you've got to care about your content. You've got to care about what you're putting out there, and you've got to show that you care about your customers. Ultimately, everything is about relationships. It's about being as human as possible. If it's easy, it's not going to work. There has got to be a bit of effort into what you do on socials.
I was thinking about it a bit like, if in real life, if you're meeting someone at a networking group, you tell them what you do. You tell them about business. And you tell them a bit about yourself. And you ask them about them, and then you might get a bit of social proofing. So you work with someone, you tell them about that. Especially on LinkedIn, I suppose, where you say, you introduce yourself and the business, what you do, and then maybe a little bit of personal who you are and your interests, and then a bit of social proofing, and people will see that, and they get to know you a bit more, and you build up some form of trust cycle with them, and then, you know, if you've got a good review, they might go, okay, I'm going to message you.
It's random. You like on network, the combination between networking and social media is really, really weird. It's like, sometimes I just worked with someone and I've known the guy for a decade, and never in my whole life would I thought he's ever going to work with me. I just thought he's not one of those clients that's ever going to get in contact, and he needed some LinkedIn training, and he came to me. But then equally, someone might meet you for the first time and you just have such a compelling conversation with them that, again, the social media side is the social proof of you meeting them, that everything you said face to face stacks up. It's just, I think actually networking and social media is a really good combination. And I think, again, one of the classic don'ts, or the things that people do wrong, is people are good at one or the other, and you don't merge the two. So you get people who are very good at face-to-face networking that hardly post on social media, and you get people who are very good at social media that don't go to face-to-face networking. And the combination, the sweet spot, is when you do both. It's like meeting someone you know from social media helps build that rapport. And I think, again, it goes down to the levels of visibility you are. Like, again, face-to-face is a real good level. I love networking. I run my own networking events, and having that chance to meet people and have a real-life conversation, but then not disappear for the 30 days in between next networking meeting is really, really good.
It's fascinating. We talk a lot, and there's a side to SEO where we talk about doing real-world shit. And part of that is why this podcast is on, because we're not manufacturing anything, it's real. And we can create some real world stuff out of it. And it's just, I feel like there's a bit more humanity in that. And I think algorithms are trying to work out what a good business is and what a real business is, because they want to supply the best results possible for the users, so they keep coming back. And then they can charge advertising. Like that. And that, if you sell everything from that, it's real, and you're having your real conversations, you're building up trust, and it's a really good way of facilitating that.
I mean, I think, again, the big part of social is content, and your content thing is a podcast, and it's clips that you can use on social. I mean, you love this as SEO, but I've always been back to those days of music, which we mentioned at the start. Blogging, like written word is really my sweet spot, and I have written on my website for Ultimate HQ about social media 640 plus blogs. And that is insane to a lot of people. Some of them I need to look at and refresh, but that has always been value-led content. How can I help the user or my customers in the best possible way? And that's how I approach all forms of social, whether it's a short form Instagram post or if it's a long form 1,500 word blog. It's always like, how can I help people? And the reality is, and this is the way I approach it, people are scared of giving away too much content. I say to people, you don't need my social media training if you read those 640 blogs. The reality is it's quicker to have half a day with me than it is to read 640 blogs. So that's where you win. You give away your best content, but by giving away your best stuff, you actually realise you can get one-to-one bespoke stuff from a user or from a person, a business.
I mean, it relates so well to SEO, that because helpful content, there was what they called a helpful content update on the algorithm. You know, and if you're satisfying the search intent for the user by providing helpful content that answers the questions that everyone's asking, it's really simple.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think maybe that's again where social media has gone a little bit iffy at the moment. There's too much focus on entertaining content, and that to me doesn't give value. I don't care whether a business coach dances or points on a TikTok video. I care whether what they're saying actually matters. And usually what you're finding is the dancing and the pointing or the jokey stuff is there to cover over the fact they don't actually know what they're talking about. And I think when you can prove, particularly on something like blogging, if you've written 1,500, 2,000 words on a subject, you probably know what you're talking about. If you've done a dance where you go 1 reason, 2 reasons, 3 reasons, 4 reasons, and you've given no more extra value than that, you're probably just winging it.
Do you have any advice for business?
Time management. I think time blocking is a big thing. Like, focusing on one task at a specific time. So I use my phone timer quite often. So when I say I'm doing 15 minutes a day engagement on LinkedIn, that is set to a timer. Because it's so easy to say I'm spending 15 minutes a day. And when you don't set a timer to it, you're quite unproductive with your time. So you sort of dabble, you get distracted by an email or so on. So I think time blocking definitely. In order on social media and generally any form of business development, sales, presentations, it's documenting ideas a lot of the time. Most people don't have a formal process for documenting. It can be something as formal as I email the idea to myself and just put the subject word as idea, and that's what I do all the time. So we did a training session yesterday, and I'm getting paid to do that training session, but during that training session there were 5 ideas that came from that training session. I just quickly pinged an email to myself. Those are 5 pieces of content, whereas most people would take those tasks separately to go, right, I'm in a training session or I'm having a networking meeting, and that's the time of doing that. What they're not doing is continually having those cogs that go around your head and generating ideas for social media. So I never run out of ideas because it's based on something a customer has said, someone said at a networking meeting, someone has said on an email, a piece of content I've consumed on social media. Like, literally, my idea generation is happening 24 hours a day. I don't treat it as a separate task to do. It's just, I've probably got enough ideas now for the next 2 months without coming up with any new ones, because they're all on my email.
Maybe the benefit of providing, teaching as well.
Yes.
You can real world people asking you the questions that
they want answering.
Yes.
And it just turns into content. Like, everything is content this day in this day and age. It really is.
I just had an idea for a post. And is there any advice that you would give to anyone wanting to start out in your industry?
Get social proof is probably the idea that I would give to it. It's a very popular and saturated industry of social media, and I think there's many different facets to it. And that's what I said at the beginning. Like, people expect you to do 5 different areas of social media. What I'd honestly say is, if you are a videographer, stick to videography. If you're a photographer, stick to photography. If you're a graphic designer, stick to graphic design. If you're a copywriter, stick to copywriting.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is a lot of people try and be generalists and do everything. So they'll do one of those areas, but then upsell social media management as part of that service. You'll actually get more work. Collaborate with people. So collaborate with a social media manager, or I'll collaborate with a photographer, or so on like that. So that's advice I'd give. Get social proof is the key. So when you're starting out, if you're 18, 19 years old, think of a family member that runs a business. Get a case study based off that family member. You're supporting your family at the same time as having a case study that you can go and take out to clients. Because I think that's the problem. You can't just rely on, here's an Instagram account, here's something that looks nice. Again, it goes back to sales. You've got to prove that you've increased the sales by 10, 20, 30%. And once you've got that case study, keep building on it, keep getting case studies, keep getting testimonials. One of the best pieces of advice I had, and I think it was only the second ever networking event I went to, and I was told that your testimonials are your gold. What your customers say about you is 10 times more important than what you say about yourself. And I ran with that to the point now where I've got over 800 reviews for social media. And that's kind of, if I wouldn't have gone to that one networking meeting in the early days and heard someone say that, I probably would have never asked a customer for a review.
Yeah.
So I think, case studies, reviews are massive.
I had some clients asking, how do I get more reviews? I said, well, you've got to ask for them, and it's when you ask for them.
Yeah, definitely. I think most people don't naturally leave reviews. So we work in restaurant sectors quite a bit. And if they have 200 customers in over a weekend, one person might review. And we're continually telling the client, ask your customers every time they come in for a review.
Someone who's, you've looked at them in the wrong way and they've just put a not happy thing on, whereas you've had 800 other customers
that love it, but you just never asked.
I mean, that's a really good bit of advice, actually. And how do you measure success?
Personally or for business?
Go with personal.
Am I happy? That's the question. I think it's the old quote that's misattributed to John Lennon, where he sort of said, what do you want to be when you're older? And he said, I want to be happy. And I think happiness, if I enjoy what I do when I get up in the morning, and I do, I've been doing it for, so 2024 will be 15 years of Ultram HQ, and I still am excited to do it. Whereas when I worked in music, the reason I left music, as much as it appeared very glamorous from the outside, I stopped enjoying it. So at one stage I had to make the call, do a go 100 miles an hour at Ultram HQ and ditch the music, and that's what I did, because I just wasn't, I love music, I wasn't enjoying the business aspect of it. So I think personally, happiness.
Yeah. People, any advice I have to people going to universities, do what you love doing, because you'll enjoy doing it and you'll be successful at that.
Yeah.
You'll make money doing anything if you enjoy it. And that's from experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Doing computer science, which was completely, may have been 2 weeks before I applied. I saw that some guy was making £1,000 a day in London as a developer. And I changed everything I was going to do. And here we are. Amazing. Well, I think we could talk for hours and hours and days about this, and we should probably do a number 2. a second episode, but it's been really good having you on.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time and coming.
Oh, thanks for having us.
And if there are businesses and individuals out there that would like some training or to do their social media, how do they find you?
I think the easiest way, we've got all our social media links on our website. So go to our website, so it's ultramhq.co.uk. You'll find everything there. You'll find our about section, the links to our socials and our blog on there, and obviously the information on the training and management. I think the key for when you're deciding, if you go on that website, if you want training, it's all down to time and inclination. If you've got the time to do it, go for training. if you've got no time and no inclination, outsource it and go for social media management.
Yeah. And I can thoroughly recommend it.
Thank you very much.
Marvellous.
Sorted.